Welcome to Comic Kitty Podcast. My name is Ken Javier.
I'm Alex A.
Once again, I am Daniel.
And today, Daniel, what are we going to be doing?
Oh, we're going to be looking at two things today. Number one, we're going to be reviewing Severed Souls by
Jay
Gillespie. And we're also going to be talking about our favorite indie books that were indie before they became big.
Oh, okay. So is the requirement that we had to break the story? Or could I be that guy in the coffee shop who kind of turns my nose up at the other people who are all talking about, like, did you watch this the other night? And I'm all like, I watched it 10 years ago because I'm better than you.
Okay. Number one, you're not George R. R. Martin fan, so that's always good. Number two, like I was saying before, you don't actually have the beard for that. That's really needed for the beard.
I say that as I stroke my beard, by the way.
That's it.
I've got the goatee now.
I'm surrounded by many impressive beards here, and I'm a little beard envious, to be honest.
That's okay. When a long time ago, I did a game with five gentlemen who were all in various stages of beards. We just call ourselves Beard Spectrum. But yeah, this is one of those things that, you can't say, look, I knew it before then, if you so want to. It's the greatest way to turn off a conversation, but it's a great way to say, look, here's the cool stuff that came from it. Here's the really good stuff that was really inspirational.
I think it'd be okay if you thought it,
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Just saying, I like to think I'm better than people, so that's just, how I live.
But Alex, let's start with you. You actually had some great ideas for things you liked before they were big.
Yeah, looking at the subject for what comics were indie, a lot of what I thought was indie was actually, upon further research, I come to see, these guys actually hit pretty big right off the bat. One of the examples is Spawn. Now, at the time, I thought, hey, who else would be reading this? I must be the only one. But, the guy was already famous beforehand when he was doing Spider-Man. And as soon as he did his own thing with Image, his comic pretty much hit popularity right off the bat. Although not as big as Marvel or DC, but he had a following. Mm-hmm. I don't think that would really classify him as being indie. Another one I remember as a child reading off the coffee tables, or just going to a doctor's appointment in Mexico. Just these little digest-sized comics called Caliman. Now, for most who aren't familiar with who Caliman is a mixture between Doctor Strange, Batman, and I would say Iron Fist.
So a lot of magic and science.
Well, you see, and the interesting is Caliman actually does not have any superpowers.
Okay.
He just actually uses the human, I guess, kind of like what Batman does. He reaches the human peak level for any type of strength there is, or mental ability, or knowledge.
Yeah.
So he comes off being a very powerful character when it's all said and done. But anyway, this guy started off as a radio drama in 1963. 1962, 1963. I wasn't around at the time, but he had a good following all across Mexico. And as soon as they decided, we need to expand on this story a little bit more, and let's create a comic out of it. 1965, whenever that issue hit, the first issue hit, it became a nationwide sensation. And till this day, Caliman is still around. So the most popular iterations were in black and white. But now crossing over to the most recent favorite, when not too long ago, I guess I could say, it would be Scott Pilgrim.
Nice.
Now,
all right.
Scott Pilgrim was invented by a guy named O'Malley. I guess he was more of a teenager at the time. Or
something like that.
Something like that. He was in the cool kids crowd, I would have to say. He was inspired by a band by Plumtree with the song named Scott Pilgrim. And I listened to the song. It's actually a pretty good song. But his comic was actually comedy-based. It had game elements. I don't think I need to really explain this. I would think Scott Pilgrim is now popular enough now that I shouldn't have to
with the movie by
much.
Edgar Wright, yeah.
So, Alex, so you said that the name Scott Pilgrim was created by O'Malley, or was that the song created for him by his character?
That was the inspiration. His inspiration for his comic was from Scott Pilgrim, which is a song title
Oh, okay.
from a band named Plumtree.
Okay, so Plumtree made a song called Scott Pilgrim, and then he made a comic book from that.
Well, yeah, and then using his own experiences and things like that. Because
Gotcha.
if what I've read is correct, one of the things that he mentions, and please correct me, Alex, you are the authority on this one. He said he really liked the idea that when you're in love, you feel like a superhero. And so he built a whole comic around the idea of being in love as a superpower.
Yeah, yeah.
And, you know, and the weird nonsense that happens when dealing with your exes and, you know, and the baggage that relationship brings, but just taking it and hyperbolizing it to an nth degree, which was just beautiful.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
huh?
I mean, the whole movie. I mean, if you ever got a chance to see it, is a love story, and how he develops all these superpowers by fighting for his love.
Yeah.
I always want to call him John Cena, but it's not John Cena, it's John Cera, right?
Yeah. Michael Cera.
Oh, it's not even John, it's Michael. John Pilgrim saves the
Hit
world.
the golf ball backwards.
yeah. See?
John Cena Saves the World are just different movies, usually done by the World Wrestling Federation.
Because Sarah sounds like Cena, which then his name is John. Okay, I'm sorry.
No
about
worries,
that.
no worries.
So,
Actually, interestingly enough, oh god, I had an idea. Boom, gone. But the Scott Pilgrim versus the World, the fascinating thing about both the movie and the books is the fact that the books were not completed when the movie came out. So the writer actually liked the ending that came with the movie so much he wrote it into his books.
Yeah, that's true.
yeah.
How did you remember this? I completely forgot about that little.
All I remember about the movie was like he was dating an Asian girl, and then all of a sudden he wasn't dating the Asian girl, and
Yeah.
the Asian girl was kind of upset, but then still in love, and they played Zelda music, and it was awesome.
It was awesome.
Oh, they played all sorts of gamey music, and I think that's the thing that hit all the crowd at the time. And the thing is, he was using ideas that weren't so popular at the time. He wanted to do a manga version of, his comic, which wasn't really popular in Canada. So he was probably, I would say, one of the first to create a shonen version of manga, and it from there became popular.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
He really did some great work.
Awesome. Do you ever think that, like in Japan, maybe like somebody's drawing like American style, and Japanese people are all like, "This is awesome! I'm tired of this manga stuff."
Actually, the funny thing is, sometimes yes. I mean, you see this in there's an anime out there called Fulikuli or FLCL, where it's all done in your standard anime-like drawing sense, and then they, occasionally they'll blink to actual manga, which is popular to do in anime sometimes to do. But then for no reason, they switch their animation style to South Park. And
Wow, that's
for literally no reason. And
Yeah.
they'll just do this in various things will do this. Now, a lot of times they'll do this, they'll make fun of like U.S. comic books because they'll actually make fun of them.
yeah.
Because while there is this attraction because of the movies and everything else like that, they see the story is very different and hard to deal with, because these are people who are born with powers rather than people who develop and nurture and drive to develop their powers. So,
Yeah, I've been on a few forums, and I'd like to say a lot of them are very prideful as far as their cultural identity goes. They really don't. I say they, but I mean from the forums that I've been reading, there's some hardcore fans for the traditional stuff in their
So
country.
they're not happy with this American appropriation of Japanese manga, which
Yeah,
is another
and
podcast.
We're just
But-
hated everywhere.
Well, I just like to think there's a kid out there in Japan who's just flipping his lid over watching, American Dad, and he's just so in love with the whole form of that. And
I'm waiting to see the Japanese kid whose room is lined in Superman logos. Because there's got to be that one kid that they all like go, really, dude? But no, he's got Superman logos all over the place. Of course, next to him is his friend who's got chibi girls and busty chibi girls over every last inch of his apartment. So,
Well, I mean, that's what Teen Titans Go is pretty
It
much
is.
a chibi version of the Teen Titans. And I don't know if you've ever seen Spider-Man. Their version of Spider-Man has a motorcycle, and he's also, he for some weird reason, turns into a giant.
Well, no, Jet Jaguar. Sorry, not Jet Jaguar. That was everything. It was Jaguar Man. There is, the Spider-Man TV show they released in Japan actually was the inspiration for, and I'm not kidding here, Power Rangers was built off of the show Spider-Man because he has this signal watch. He's actually an alien rather than,
Right, yeah.
and he does the signal watch, and there are flying fortress will come in, and he says another thing because it's Jaguar Man, go, and it transforms into a giant robot that Spider-Man goes into. And that was so popular, even though they lost the license for Spider-Man, that they then built this team of warriors who all wear a very specific color.
Wow.
And that's where you get
Power Rangers.
Power Rangers.
All right, go
I did
Power
not know
Rangers.
that.
Yeah.
Love it, love it, love it.
Power Rangers itself is a great thing because it now is an indie comic based on the American version of Power Rangers that we have. You can find this through, I think it's either IDW or Boom. It's Boom Studios. And that's actually been very popular. And I'm surprised they didn't, blend themselves off into something like Marvel, which, like I said, they started Spider-Man. Why didn't they go the direction? But I guess they decided to go the indie route because there are a lot more. You'll find more creativity in some of the indie route, and I suspect it's cheaper. But at the same regard, I mean, from there, you're still dealing with some really great indie books. And getting back on topic, I mean, Alex, that was great, really cool. Thank you very much. But Ken, what about you? I mean, let's go to the next one. I mean, how do we blend this into? I mean, what is it that you had that became great and eventually inspired another TV show?
No, I definitely would like to chime in on that. And actually, I'm going to add on to what Alex said. Mm-hmm. So I like Spawn. You know what? And
Perry.
That's it. Now I understand. Totally what Alex was saying, and I think it actually segues perfectly into what one of our other podcasts is what is indie. And but for me, I felt Spawn was an indie title. As a kid, probably younger than my son's age. It was. Looking at Spawn was something different. It wasn't a Spider-Man to me. It wasn't the Uncanny X-Men. It wasn't X-Force. It wasn't Alpha Flight. It was, here's a dude who is tormented, who lives in hell. His face is all burnt up, but then he kind of looks like Spider-Man. But, he's not because he has this huge cape, but he's drawn by Todd McFarlane.
Yep.
Todd. See, I keep on wanting to say Seth, but it's Todd.
It's Todd McFarlane, yep.
But what I liked about it is and kind of, our subject today is, what was, considered indie and then just kind of blew up. I want to kind of focus more on just the blowing up aspect of it. I agree 100%. I own 3 issues of Spawn #1 because I was going to retire off of Spawn money and be super rich. And, when you're a kid buying 3, #1s of a comic, you definitely, kind of in the back of your mind know that, yeah, this is something big. So I can't really say that I broke Spawn or I was the one who told everybody about Spawn, but definitely a huge supporter of it. When that horrible Spawn movie came out with John Leguizamo and
John was fun. Everything else,
I had mixed feelings about it. I actually liked that movie.
Oh my god!
Only because
Spawn, you broke my heart. But I'm sorry. Go
only
ahead.
because I was such a fan of the comic.
Yeah. But then that's the thing. I was a fan too, and I had super high expectations. But I mean, if you really think about it, and Dan, I know you know this. When did Spawn come out? When did that movie come out?
The movie came out in 1990. I'd like to say 1995, but
1995. So the only other hero movie that I'd seen around that time was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and He-Man with Dolph Lundgren, right?
Oh.
So, this was, before Marvel Studios, DC Studios. And granted, yeah, I know there was a Superman movie that was out.
The Superman movie, the first one came out in like 79.
Yeah, but this was something just totally different. It was a movie that came out to introduce Spawn to the world. People didn't know who Spawn was, but they knew that they wanted to see a Spawn movie. Now, who was that? Michael Jai White or who was?
Yes, Michael Jai White.
Yeah. So and again, it was. I think the biggest name was John Leguizamo to me. I didn't know Michael Jai White, and I don't know who the other protagonist was.
Well, I know that the big name they had on there besides John Leguizamo was actually Martin Sheen.
That's right, Martin Sheen. So here you have a book that came out. Definitely by a very prominent comic book and established artist at the time, and that was one of their Image's flagship franchises that they had. But it was still unknown to people. Like I said, you could go up to the average person and say, who's a Spider-Man, who's Cyclops, and you say, oh, I kind of know who that is, right? Stan Lee in this, and not everybody knew Todd McFarlane, but for it to boom into a terrible movie, I'm sorry, I'm going to say that,
Okay, but you got to admit, terrible movie, but also a really good HBO series animated.
Yeah, I will say it did have its redemption there with the HBO animated series, but it was just something so different out there. It was kind of like, I'm going to compare it to The Walking Dead, and I know we're going to do a lot of comparisons with that, but Walking Dead, it took its stair steps, right? It said, you know what, we're going to do comic, we're going to go into television, and then when we start losing money, we're going to do a movie because people are going to throw money at this thing. But it was just like comic straight to movie, and that was it. And there was no in between. And I like that something so something medium sized, not small, was able to make it to the big screen, but unfortunately flop. But even with Spawn, I think there was a lot of toys. I threw a lot of my money into the toys with it. I think I'm actually one toy away from collecting the entire first series that came out. And this was before eBay. This was before Craigslist. This was before you can get anything mailed to you. You'd had to go to Target, Walmart, Walgreens, Eckerd's out there. Yeah. I blanketed everywhere to find these toys, and it was tough. It was really tough to find them, but they branched into toys. And then, oddly enough, you talked about the HBO series, and now I read that they're actually taking another chance, and they want to re-release or reboot the Spawn series.
Yeah, why not? They did it with Spider-Man, they did it with Batman, they did it with, even the Man of Steel. So, honestly, if they got a property and they know it can make money because it has a fan base, they're probably going to try anyway.
Yeah, and I'm going to give my money away to Todd McFarlane and his Spawn movie that was, I think, being directed by the same person who did Get Out.
I
don't think it's going to be Peele or Key. Is it T or P? Somebody who worked
Jordan
with
Peele.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be Jordan Peele, but it's going to be somebody who worked with them. Even though that was Jordan Peele's movie, but that's from what I understand. But I think Todd McFarlane wants this just to be very dark and gritty and not necessarily anti-Marvel DC, but again, it's going to follow closely to the book and its feel of that. So definitely very excited to see that with that. Kind of on the Image bandwagon. I guess you can call me Image fanboy at this point.
Hey, feel
but Invincible brought that up with the last podcast. But yeah, Seth Rogen and Adam, the guy from the Goldberg show. They're working on an Invincible movie.
Really?
Yeah, and that I'm going to be excited to see because again, it's going to introduce to the mainstream. Everybody knows Seth Rogen. They know that he's a comic book nerd. I guess he's an alternate version of who am I trying to say, of a Kevin Smith. Kind of really, but
they have a lot of parallels now after they worked with Zach and Miri making porno.
But definitely, I think people are gonna be all like, oh, what's this Invincible thing, and is this like a Spider-Man or a Superman? And they're gonna be totally shocked. But hopefully they do it right. Hopefully it's not a Green Hornet type situation.
Oh God, I will not forgive them for Green Hornet. As a Green Hornet fan,
that hurt me too. That hurt me too.
You're transitioning from Bruce Lee into an unknown.
But he's supposed to be the Taiwanese Justin Timberlake. That's what I was promised.
Oh. The whole movie itself was a. There's a child in the room. I can't use what I want to say, but
Seth Rogen. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It was a total Charlie Foxtrot situation.
Yeah.
But because it's one of the 3 comic book movies that I have sat through and turned off.
Yeah.
Where I actually went, I'm done. I'm sorry, I'm done with you people. Which, as my wife can tell you, is a rarity. Yeah. I mean, I've sat through some really bad comic book movies because they were comic book movies, and I'm like I said, I have old copies of the Green Hornet radio show and that sort of stuff. They had some really great potential, but I hope they do well because these guys can make some really good movies. Mm-hmm. And Invincible is by the same guy who brought us Walking Dead.
Yeah, absolutely.
It has some great potential. I wish it the best, but we'll see what we get.
Yeah, for something like that, I could definitely see it as a show.
Yeah.
If they did a release on Netflix, you'd have, I would say, all the fan base right there. Just, and people who don't know it could get introduced to it that way. And, I think they'd become fans because I think a movie is more of a one-hit kind of deal. You either make it or you don't.
Yeah.
And same like with the Spawn movie, I don't think it hit because obviously there wasn't a sequel.
But that's the thing. That was before Marvel did their gambit. And and now everybody wants a Marvel Universe MCU situation. So if Image says, look, they did it, why can't we? Spawn could be the launching point of something actually kind of interesting. It could be horrible, but it could be interesting. But I think Spawn in of itself would be interesting to see as a reboot, seriously done, serious special effects, less of a, this is a comic book, we're going to play it as a comic book movie, and more of the, have you watched Watchmen? Have you watched the Freddy reboot? Have you watched a couple of horror movies? We're going in that direction.
Yeah.
That'd be kind of cool.
Definitely. All right. Well, I'm excited to hear what you got, Dan.
Oh,
because I know you are the wealth of knowledge, and I'm gonna get my pen and paper out because I'm about to go to school here.
Oh,
and
geez.
learn.
Well, okay. When I given the assignment, we said, okay, let's get 3 and figure it out. And I processed a lot of books because there's a lot of stuff which can be considered indie that I like. Some stuff that's debatable. Like one thing that I have that's on the debatable line of whether or not it's indie is The Mask. Now, I'm not gonna lie here. This one I actually knew of. I think I read a book or two before the movie came out. But I wasn't considered like, oh my god, I have to have everything. But The Mask was fascinating, and I got even more fascinated after the movie. Mostly because I saw where they were going. I saw the direction the comic was going, and I was fascinated. It was because the movie is one thing. It's a live action cartoon as a musical, whereas the book is kind of a horror. It actually is a horror story of both psychological and mental terror, as well as a really, really bloody story. But that one actually went into a different direction, and the reboot they did with the movie actually helped it go further because you have the Mask TV series, which was in syndication. They had the Son of the Mask, which we will not speak of here.
The Jamie Kennedy.
Oh yeah.
Mask. Come on, so much better than Jim Carrey Mask,
Oh.
right?
Ow, that hurt.
Yeah. But of the other ones that I really like, some stuff I actually still consider indie, and I don't know if it's considered big yet, are things like Terror of the Witch of the Black Rose, which I really enjoy. It's had a good cult following, and the guy has been doing it for 10 years, so it's got to be doing something successful. But when you talk about something before it was big, I have 2 names on my list, which I love. One is, for those who know me, I am a titanic Matt Wagner fan. I love the man, I love his work, and I'm dying to see where this goes with his new Mage the Hero Denied, which is a book we have literally been waiting for 30 years for. Thank you, Matt, for finally doing it. But what introduced me to Matt Wagner stuff was Grendel. Grendel, for those who don't know, is hard to explain, mostly because it started in the early 80s as a kind of French revival anti-hero book. The main character is an assassin, his main villain is a police person who's a werewolf. It's kind of hard to explain, but it kept building off itself, so you get future versions of itself, literally the spirit of one person being passed along to the next and the next and the next. And it keeps building itself into a cyberpunk universe, into a post-apocalyptic universe, into a universe where the icon of Grendel becomes a paladin's code. And watching that paladin's code then get corrupted. It's this epic, sweeping story that they then said, okay, we really didn't talk about the first person a lot. And they went back, and the big one for me to really get introduced to Grendel was one part, a story by James Robinson called Four Devils, One Hell, which was his first book ever done, which was great. The other one was a Batman Grendel crossover, which to this day I still consider to be just a masterpiece of both art and storytelling. It is amazing. The other one, that's Grendel, and like I said, Matt, if you're listening, I love you. Not in a platonic way, as a fanboy.
It's a bromance.
It's a bromance. I actually have several of his signatures that I used to be in Portland, which he's at every Portland comic convention because he lives in the area, and I've seen his work and I've gotten his stuff, and it's like, yeah, he is amazing. And his son's work is really coming along. He's really doing some great stuff. But the other one, before it was indie, you cannot deny that even to this day, it is still considered indie. The Tick. For those who don't know, where have you been? The Tick is a parody of every comic book ever made, but it's not done in such a way that it's silly or derisive or even just playing down the idea that superheroes are silly. It's an homage in a beautiful way. You have 2 characters: the Tick, who may be actually really insane, who has no memory of his life, has no memory of his existence before waking up in an insane asylum and deciding he's bored and leaves. Through the wall, tearing off the straitjacket, just going, "Oh, I'm bored," and then gone. And his sidekick, who is a man who is lost in his own mind, not as an insane way, but as in he's kind of lost in society, named Arthur, who doesn't realize what he's getting himself into. The Tick has had a titanic following. And if you pay attention to a lot of stuff from the 80s and 90s, you'd be surprised at how many bizarre Tick references there are. But the Tick started off as a comic, and it's black and white independent through, I think it was New England Comics. But he started releasing his own T-shirts, which appear tons of places. You can see in the background of movies and things like that. Just, they're there. It's like this inside joke that everyone knows. And then it got its TV series in the 90s, which was fabulous. I loved every minute of it. Then it got its TV show in the late 2000s with Patrick Warburton in the title role, who made the role his own. He really did. And he had the great voice. He had the great characterization. And now we have the new series on Amazon, where it's another Patrick. I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he was in almost every Edgar Wright movie and Guardians of the Galaxy as the Tick, and chewing the scenery like it's a steak. But doing so in such a brilliant way that you can't help but to watch this thing and love it, even though, again, it's both making fun of superheroes and showcasing what they can really be at the same time. I love the Tick. If nothing else, you gotta love a character who, no matter what, is unbelievably positive. He is just that, no matter how bleak and strange circumstances are, he points his finger at this guy and, onward, chum. He chews the scenery, but he does it in such a way that you just go, this is amazing. This is hysterical. And they keep, with every iteration of the comic and every iteration of the show, they keep bringing in new characters and new things that become part of the legend. The Terror in the new book is played by the guy who brought us Rorschach and the Freddy reboot.
Oh, yeah.
And you have to love a thing. This is not a spoiler, but the first episode, the Terror does some massively bad stuff to a very young Arthur.
Now, when you talk about the first episode, are we talking about the cartoon or the Amazon Prime
Amazon
show?
Prime show,
okay.
Yeah. Thank you for the clarification. But yeah, he comes up to the very young Arthur after doing these horrible acts and does a granddad, oh, what's behind your ear? Pulls out behind the ear. Huh, nothing. Then looks the kid right in the eye. You got nothing! And walks away. It was like, I processed that idea for like days. I thought it was hysterical. But that's the idea of the Tick, is that you have all these superhero-like ideas brought down to their baser level and made fun of and played with, but at the same time respected in such a way that you can't stop but admire. So yeah,
it's kind of weird that like in the Amazon Prime show, it showed the origin for the Tick. They kind of they didn't say this out, straight out, but they kind of insinuated that maybe the Tick was created in Arthur's bedroom.
Yeah, that it was in his mind, his own projection, and that he's actually crazy. That's new. That's actually only to that particular series. And I think they re-edited that because the fans of the series, the comics, basically went, what are you doing? Because that was the pilot. And after the pilot, they kind of ignored that idea. Because then you had the sister running going, wait, I can see him too. Why can't I see him too? And more interactions with other characters. So you got to see more of the Tick as the Tick, while realizing this is not the Tick's story. This is Arthur's. And that in and of itself brings it down to a more human level.
Now, I have to say, I love the voice that the character brings to the Tick. I think his name is Peter, and I have it here.
Yeah.
Peter Serafinowicz.
Yes. I'm sorry. Not Patrick. Was it Peter?
He doesn't have the build for the Tick.
No,
nowhere near it, but he has a voice. And I think they were, I guess, leaning on that aspect for the character to kind of write it through the show. And they said, you know what? It doesn't need to be realistic. This is a show that's making fun of superheroes after all.
Yeah.
I don't know, but the suit, you could tell there's like muscles built into the suit, so it's kind of cheesy.
Were there nipples? Because I haven't seen this thing yet.
Oh no, we will not discuss
that
the
man has
Batman
nipples.
Robins. Yeah.
All right, I'm just saying.
That's only because some people have a very particular idea of what a Batman chest should look like, and we're very thankful they're not making movies anymore.
But I've got to say, I was a fan of the cartoon show, and as soon as it hit Amazon, I was like, you know what? I'm waiting, and I would just rewatch the first episode that they were teasing for the longest time.
Yes.
And my son instantly gravitated to it.
And that's the thing. I mean, there's episodes of the original cartoon series which are not available on DVD. You have to hunt them down on things like YouTube, and even then they'll take them off fairly quickly because of violating copyright, which I understand. But these are in classic episodes where, like one where he's dealing with Galactus, their version of Galactus. and the Tick is living on Galactus's body, doing little cleanup jobs to earn his keep. And eventually, you get the great line of, well, that's your problem. You got a planet stuck in your ear. Hold on a second. Pull something out. He has to drive over Galactus in a moon rover, or else he's never going to get to the toes to clean them out in time. And eventually escapes on a slipper. But it's an episode like that. It's so beautiful and just amazing. And they just won't put it to DVD. They won't put it to streaming. And that's a disappointing. But, So.
It'll eventually get there. It's one of those things that you don't see it for a while, but just like X-Men, it just all of a sudden reappeared on Hulu.
That's true.
So
That's true. I used to get my X-Men videotapes from Pizza Hut.
Oh,
you remember that?
Oh, yes.
Yes, yeah. See, I'm going to go on eBay now and look for those old X-Men tapes.
Also, you don't have to. You can probably find them at a half-price books near you. I mean, I can still find VHS copies of Babylon 5 and Mystery Science Theater 3000.
I'm telling you, these hipsters are going to come back. They're going to buy up all the VHSs, and I have them all. You want Bloodsport? You want Forrest Gump? You want The Sandlot? I got them all on VHS. So I'm going to get ready for resale. But anyways.
Yeah.
No, definitely, Dan. I think those are awesome things. Huge fan of the Tick. Definitely gonna check out more of the Grendel storylines.
I want to see what they do next because Matt Wagner only comes out with so much at a time, and he did a nice little cap off to the story recently. So if that's the end of Grendel, that's the end of Grendel. I would be sad, but at the same time, the story's been said, so no problem. Or he'll do like he did with Grendel Tales, which is basically then goes to other writers and go, "Who likes this universe? You. Okay, I need 30 pages from you. I need 20 pages from you, and I need 20 pages from you. See you in a month." Which, if that happens, I got 20 pages I can do.
That's it.
But I mean, that brings us to a great leading point. You're mentioned before. So
it is now the portion where we review a indie book, and today we have the pleasure of reviewing one of Comic Indie's very own Jay Gillespie comic series, Severed Souls.
Severed Souls.
Yep.
What can I say? This is, I do have to make a disclaimer. Jay Gillespie is a good friend of ours. So, just because he's our friend, though, doesn't mean that we have to give him all the aces. For this one review, we're going to have to pause our friendship for a bit. Sorry, Jay.
Jay, sorry. The pausing will begin now. It will end in 20 minutes when we will be friends again, we hope. Yeah, Severed Souls is a interesting story about essentially good and evil, but it's mostly about, for lack of a better term, someone bad wants something to stay alive. We have other people who are in the modern day and throughout time who have the fuel that this person needs to survive. And the question is, these people, these grade A souls, have powers and they have abilities because they are these beautiful and great souls, and how they interact with the world. So again, we have this one person needs something for doom for the world. These other people need other things, not necessarily to keep good alive in the world, but to stay alive. And you have people in the middle who are both acting as brokers, people who are acting as defenders, people who are acting as anything in the spectrum to go with this. So it's not just a straight story of good and evil, but it is a story of, it's a story of limited resources. Let's not lie. And it is an interesting idea about ancient legends and ancient concepts that are in fact the mistruths of these older ideas bleeding through the centuries, leading up to our protagonists who don't see it that way. They just see it as magic. They just see it as the things they can do, and the people around them who get caught up in this tangled net of intrigue and desire.
And I do have to say, I do appreciate, and just to expand on that one, the last thing you were talking about, that's one of the things I do appreciate about Severed Souls is that Jay takes the story and he says, you know what, there's actually an explanation for vampires. There's actually an explanation for the Nephilim. These are all fables that have been exaggerated, but there's some truth to it. There's a reason why the Nephilim were feared the way they were. They were viewed as giants, but really these guys were just very, very powerful. And as far as a vampire theme, yes, you have these Nephilim people that were not really large. They were just very powerful, but they ended up needing, some of them would consume other souls and I guess this is what they would do throughout the ages. They would find other people and consume their souls. So that's where you get the story of the vampires.
Yeah.
Right. And what I liked, what I liked about what you said, Dan, it's an explanation of powers or how they came to be. I mean, at the end of the day, we're all, grown men sitting here reading comic books. And, what did we like about the comic books is the fact that, there was powers here. The X-Men, you had Cyclops with laser beam eyes. You had Kitty Pryde who can run through walls. You had, just everybody who could do certain things. But I like how Jay uses this, explanation of souls, almost, what to say, like Highlander-ish, passing on or through each other through killing, but it's just like they're almost handed down. And I didn't become this way because I had a mutant gene. I didn't become this way because I was exposed to gamma radiation. I was this way because this is an ancient soul that had a power that was kind of passed down to me. And it's a story of learning. It's a story of love. It's a story of, oh wow, I have something really special now. And now the bad dudes kind of want to come and take it because they need it to live. One thing you had talked about too earlier, Dan, is you had mentioned the grading of souls. So like not all souls are created equal. Do you mind kind of expanding on that?
One thing that he goes into the story, because there are the main villain needs souls, and he could either have a lot of, let's just call them grade E souls. In the same way, by the way, for those who don't know, grade E meat is what's sold at Taco Bell. Enjoy your burrito.
Yummy.
But he can feed on those, but it takes a vast number of souls to do it. He really needs a large number, and that will quickly go through his cattle water, as it were. However, if he finds the grade A souls, the creme de la creme, the unbelievable, untouched, beautiful souls of great power, he doesn't need as much to sustain himself or to increase his power. So he's looking for those very special souls, those very special people in the world to devour. And that's where our main protagonist comes in, because our main protagonist, whether she understands it or not, is one of those grade A souls. And that's where, she has, powers herself of psychokinesis. Excuse me, I know this correctly. She has the power of tactile clairvoyance, and from that point on, she gets more and more ideas and visions and things like that. So that's where her powers manifest, and it gets even stronger from there. Her soul is going from grade A to grade AA, as it were.
So, speaking of our protagonist is a beautiful young lady by the name of Beth, or Elizabeth, right?
Yes.
So, basically, she's like I'm a big Dr. Pepper fan, right? So she's the Dr. Pepper of souls, right? So now you have some of these, Mr. Pibbs, you have some Dr. Thunders, you have some Dr. K's, you have, all of those, reiterations of Dr. Pepper.
For the record, if there's an actor out there, if there's a performer out there who would like to be known as the Dr. Pepper of soul, I want to see that act.
Right. But, all right. You need to trademark that, Dr. Pepper of Soul. Wow, I like that. But yeah, Beth is our protagonist, and basically, she has the hot new good soul that everybody wants, and our villain goes by the name of
Memnus, I think is
Meanies. I'm not sure if that's pronounced right. Jay, you'd have to comment below or let us know.
Sometimes a pronunciation guide is useful.
I think it is Meanies is what it is. But Meanies basically he wants some of what Beth has got. However, she can't share it. She just basically can.
Well, how do you share a soul? It's you either got it or you don't, and plenty of musicians can tell you that's accurate. So in this case, he's got to have her and a few other people's souls out there. These, as the title said, severed souls. These bits and pieces of great magic that have been spread all throughout the world that are hard to find. So when they manifest like Beth does, suddenly he's got to have them, because there it is, right there. It's the ripening apple. Not necessarily the closest branch, but it's enough that nothing else is fruiting, so you've got to go get it.
Right. Gotcha. So in talking about Beth and Meanies, it's not so simple as to where, bad guy knocks on the door and says, hey, I'm here to take your soul. It seems like he has a whole network of villainry or folks coming around, and without spoiling it too much. Basically, I would say he has an entourage, or maybe just a huge cult following, if you will.
Well, where would your Magneto be without his Brotherhood of Evil Mutants? And that's a lot of what we have here too, is people who either may be themselves, who are grade A or grade B, who have special abilities, who have things like this, but somehow or another, either through oath, loyalty, or in at least one particular case that I won't go into, blackmail and lording their lives over them, have allied with Menes to work for him. Basically, to use the old phrase, it is better to rule in hell than serve in heaven, and that's where the direction they're going with. But it's really interesting because this also showcases, as Alex was pointing out, where powers comes from, where different powers come from, and what since they're all souls, it doesn't mean they all get the same ability or same strength. They have different traits, they have different abilities, and how they use them and how they interact with the world becomes another aspect to the book.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty interesting because, I mean, some people are naturally good at art. Some people are naturally good at, I guess, even foreseeing certain things to a certain extent by the way things are going. So develop that even further. If this soul were to live even longer, then guess what? This person develops a natural power. So I guess this is the idea of how the grade A souls come into play is the more ancient a soul is, the more powerful it gets. Mm-hmm. You see throughout the issues that this guy is an Egyptian pharaoh, if not one of the first Egyptian pharaohs ever to exist.
You're talking at least 3,000 to 4,000 years old. So again, you've got manifestations from there, but you also have Beth getting visions of her time when she was an Indian princess. You know, back in I'm not even sure they give a time frame for that, but actually, you know, she has these almost past life visions of herself, which is either her as an old soul going through her lifetimes building power, or how it's been maturing over the years until it finally manifests in Beth.
And throughout the story, you get all these little backstories, which are really interesting. And I think that's probably my most favorite backstory is with Beth. Whenever she is back in the day, she's with the prince, and he tells the story of how they meet and then how they have a child, and she dies. But Jay has a really good way. He has a good way of conveying the emotion of the characters. And he has a way of telling a great story through good paneling and the use of good characterization. You start to see who these personalities are just by the way they're talking.
Yeah. Now, we do see a lot about that, but unfortunately, I'm going to bring in something. Excuse us, Jay. This is, the judge has come.
Ooh, the hammer.
The hammer's coming down. Jay does unfortunately commit, as a writer, and Jay, I'm right there with you. I've done this a couple of times myself, but it is one of the major mortal sins. You have to show you can't tell. And definitely in the first book, and almost all the way through, there is this consistency of telling the backstories of people and telling what's going on rather than showcasing what's going on, having the interactions really drive the story. There was a couple of times, even in the first issue, where Beth sits down, she puts a blanket over a chair so she doesn't get the psychic vibes, and that in of itself is fine, but it's the pages and pages and pages of exposition of stuff that is literally happening in front of us that just bogged the story down really fast. And it, over the course of the couple of issues, he definitely improves, but he's still relying a lot too much on the exposition to carry the story. Now, some of it is, yes, you have at least, in issue 2 or 3, a full 2-page spread that is a beautiful shot of an Egyptian temple with, here's the history of Egypt, which is important to know for the story as much as a person could also, that is kind of what Wikipedia is for. At the same time, we have to see what these people are doing. We have so many characters. We have so many stories. While they do have, each of these characters is three-dimensional. Each of these characters is well-defined in their own way, as much as you can get for the amount of time we get in per screen. We're still getting too much spoon-fed, hand-delivered to us. We really need a little bit more where a character look, a character action tells more about who these people are, rather than here's their backstory, here is explaining why they're doing this, and explain why they're doing that. We don't always need it. I mean, as an example, I love Blade Runner, and there's 2 cuts of Blade Runner. The first one everyone knows. It's the film noir overspeak. He explains a couple of situations, and I admit I like the film noir feel of that. However, when you see the director's cut where they took all that away and they just let him stand on his own without any explanation, without anything else, it still carries the film further than anything else, and we're not bogged down with some of the exposition. And that's where I think Jay needs to correct for later issues, because he's got something good. He just has to just let the story be, let the dialogue carry it, let the actions carry it. Because at some point you need to step back and say, if there was no exposition, if there was no showcasing of who these people are, would people still read it?
Yeah, and actually, you know what? I think, I'll second you on that one, Dan. Definitely, I myself, I love to explain things, and I have to find myself to not
Tell
explain
me more.
As much of how I explain things, because I want people just to understand. But to kind of take an example from the book, there's a scene where there is and Jay, I'm sure you didn't mean to model him off the dude or Jeff Bridges, but I want to call him Jeff Bridges because he looks pretty cool. Art, by the way, magnificent.
Very good.
But definitely I could tell, this is a man of importance. He has, some type of criminal element, some type of stature. He's doing some shady dealings, but, I didn't necessarily need to see that, in the box. It was just really just more, again, kind of what Alex said is, with the paneling and the storytelling, I think it's all there. But, maybe less of the grayer boxes. Is necessary, because I think we could still see the story. We'll see what's going down. See, this person, is a confident person. This person is less confident. This person, Beth, is unsure of her powers at this point, and it's not necessarily too much, but not necessarily needed, I guess.
Yeah, and you could. I know this is me talking about old style comics, things like that, because sometimes even thought balloons help with a few things. Just to get you're more into the dialogue of the person who might explain a few things. Again, if rather than saying, well, this happened at this time and this happened at this time, as this overarching story, just a simple, oh God, what am I doing? Okay, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, I've got to do this. Great, all right, I'll do this. You get more out of it. You definitely get more depth of not just the explanation, but also of the character. And that's really where a lot of these stories have to come from. Because even if the characters are just beating themselves up for 27 pages, or beating other people up for 27 pages, it still drives the story faster and further than does a lot of exposition, even 2 pages of exposition comparatively.
Yeah, and it kind of reminds me of that one detective that gets way too into her main villain, and you see this entire map of all the connections she's been making. So I guess to draw on to something you said earlier, Dan, it kind of reminds me of that, only that you're having all these character backstories on the wall, and you're trying to find some way to connect them all. And I know this must be difficult for a lot of writers when they have a story they've been sitting on for so long, and you have so much depth and so many backstories and so much to explain. How do you do it in a way that's sane? And that's one thing I can appreciate. One thing that I can see, there is no need for improvement over the art over the course of years. For certain artists, you'll see that. You'll see somebody's art get better and better and better over time.
Or more refined.
Here it seems the artwork is just great and it's consistent. Mm-hmm. But what we're seeing though is a maturing of the writing direction.
Yeah.
And that may be something that just you have to follow over time to see it get even more polished.
Yeah, exactly. I think he's got now. Okay, interestingly enough, I'm curious to see where the art goes, because I like. There is another artist I truly love is Matt Wagner. Matt Wagner had a very distinctive style when he started off. His art was amazing in the early 80s. If you see his art now, it's also very good, but the style itself has come through a little bit further, a little bit crisper. And I'm curious to see where it goes with this one, because he's got a good foundation of style. He's got a good use of motion, great use of paneling, and his facial characterizations remind me a lot of what you'd see in more European comics or heavy metal or something else like that. A lot of the, not arc from, but there's a type of artist I can't think of at the moment. But yeah, he's got a very good way of creating these character faces. Now, I would love to see what happens after he's been doing this for a few years, where the process gets more refined and his voice. It's not bad at all now, but watch it as it gets crisp.
Yeah, and I have to say that's one of my favorite little tidbits that he uses throughout the series here is the the character interactions. They're great, and they seem like it seems like I'm sitting down and I'm watching some episode of maybe CSI or X-Men, for example. You get that hard detective, and you have the things that the detective would actually say, and then you get Jeff Bridges like Kenneth was talking about.
It's the dude. I like him. I like him a lot.
And he just brings a whole new life to the character. All the interactions seem completely natural.
Yeah, I think he really does a good job. I mean, he really does.
No, definitely much respect to Jay, and it again, it's I like what you said, Alex. Is definitely you could tell this is a passion project for Jay, something that's been sitting on his mind, and it's beautiful to see it just kind of explode on the pages. And I'm, to be honest, I've read through all of 1, 2, and 3. Looking forward to actually getting number 4. 4
will be out fairly soon, according to his Patreon. Which, by the way, if you're interested in his work, his Patreon does have all of his issues available. And that includes issue 4, which is going to print, is it not?
Yeah, it's already done. And if you're a subscriber at a certain level, you will be getting a physical copy for free every time a physical copy comes out.
All right,
CJ, we're friends. We're shilling for you now.
Well, I know we definitely talked about the story. We talked about the great use of art and character building and just kind of overarching what's going on. But I think it's time to take this story to school and let's start giving it some grades here.
Okay.
All right. Art wise, Alex, where are you at?
Like I said before, the art has been very consistent, and if not, it will be continuously polished throughout the later issues. I'm sure. One thing is, I didn't miss the color. It's all in black and white, but I did not miss the color. He does a great, he has a great style with black and white. So I'm gonna give it a 9.
All right, Dan. How about you?
I agree. His art is very nice. Like I said, I would love to see it when it really pops. So the moment I'm actually going to give it an 8. That's something against you, Jay. I think it's really well done, and I really want to see where it goes from here. But I think you have a little bit more room, not to improve, but to enhance. But I think you're doing really well. So I'm going to give it a solid 8.
All right, and I'm going to go with a 9 on this one. Definitely a huge Jay Gillespie art fan. Been to some of the cons that he's been at, and actually bought some of his posters and his prints. If you guys have not checked it out, check out his page on Instagram and Facebook. Definitely some wonderful art there. I'm gonna kind of go the other way on the color though. So the coloring on the covers, beautiful, magnificent.
Mm-hmm.
I would have loved to seen some color inside of the book, but again, I understand that certain books take certain directions. But that's just more of a personal preference for me. Story wise, Alex, where are you at for Unsevered Souls?
Well, I love the story. You get so many stories all packed up in one. It's sometimes it's I have to be honest. I did have to go back and reread some of those backstories just to get an idea of where I was at, to pinpoint where it all even maps out. So I'm gonna have to go with a 7 there. There's some polishing that can be done. I know there are other stories that have a whole group and a whole cast of characters, but they find ways to focus it by just say put the spotlight on 2 or 3 characters at a time.
Unfortunately, I agree with you there. I definitely agree with you. I'm also, unfortunately, again, sorry, Jay, I'm going to be the tough one here. Like I said before, the exposition, the not really having a central protagonist. We do have a central protagonist, but there's too much shotgunning going on with the story. Now, again, it's got some good ideas. It's got some great concepts, and I really think he's got a definite, interesting story in there. But but it needs polish. You need work, and I think you can really pull it through, because I think you have really great ideas here. And unfortunately, because of that, I'm going to give it a 6. Sorry, but it's still good. It's still very much a passing grade, but I think it could use a lot of work.
Okay. And then Jay, I'm going to go with an 8 on this one for story. Like I said, it's definitely I can see where it's going. I see you have the young Beth who's coming into her own powers but doesn't realize how much power she has, and people want to possess those powers. Let's see, that's more of an originality.
That's okay. Go ahead.
Power, but definitely I am following it, but there is a lot going on. Definitely I myself I know that I write a lot of words, but I don't like to read a lot of words, and there's some instances where definitely a lot of stuff is provided. It's like I can almost get a history lesson. So definitely very well thought out. Originality, Alex, what do you like?
Originality, I'm gonna have to go for an 8. It seems like there are some aspects that are not fully original. I see the Soul Eater aspect, which I've seen in other comics and shows. There are some the eternal love between Hawkman and Hawkgirl is kind of what I'm sensing here with Beth. And the thing is, it's very hard to tell an original story, but I will consider it original simply because it's a new twist on what I've seen before. And Jay takes it to another level here, and he starts to grade souls. I don't know why that doesn't sound right.
The grading of souls. I'm like saying, Beth is the Dr. Pepper of souls. she has a good soul. I don't want that Mr. B.
Okay.
It's not even. Yeah. It's not even Mr. Pibb.
So I guess what
Mr.
I can
B.
say is the way he classifies it all. So I think it's a very interesting take. So I'm going to give it an 8.
Again, I think he's got some really good stuff. Again, like you, I see a lot of very similar stories. And yeah, in the end, they say only 4 stories actually exist. Everything else is extrapolation. But I also read a lot of novels, and I see a lot of movies, and I see a lot of elements that he's brought into this. Now, again, the Nephilim very specifically doesn't come up that often, so I'll give him some definitely some props for that. A lot of the stuff about new souls and back and forth and some of the harvesting, some twist, but I wasn't sure I would considering it that original for my taste, but that's my taste. So in this particular case, I'm giving it a 6.5. But again, I always leave room to say, for these scores like these, I want to see where it goes from here. I want to see where it progresses and what it really becomes and how original this can really be. So,
yeah, and as far as originality, it's tough to write an original story, but I do like how Jay kind of took themes or powers and just kind of spun it on its head and said, well, powers happen this way. I think about Harry Houdini. Maybe he had a severed soul. And maybe he's the grade A soul, and maybe Chris Angel, the mind freak, his soul's not so good. So but props to you, Jay, on recognizing that and doing that. Definitely on some originality on that one. So I'm gonna go and give Severed Souls a 7.5 for originality. For Severed Soul, the grand...
And the final score is...
7.666667 with a line on top. Or we could just say 7.67.
7.67 it is.
Very well done, sir.
Were there triple sixes in there? Oh my gosh.
Quadruple.
Quadruple.
Right?
Now, Alex, you gotta ask, has this been rated fresh?
This is certified comic
rotten.
ending.
So, Alex, is this book certified?
Yes, it is.
So good job to you, Jay.
Bing.
Good job to Severed Souls. I like the bing. I don't know if you noticed in the last video, you threw the bing out, and I threw the score right on the bing. I threw it on the bing. So definitely.
I'll have to remember that for next time.
Well
yeah.
done. That can be like a thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So anything over a 7 is going to be certified.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It's like high school. Anything over a 7 gets you out of trouble.
Yeah. And we haven't gotten an 8 yet, so
yeah,
I'm interested to see what an 8 looks like.
I want to see what an 8 looks like. I want to see what a 9 or a 10 looks like.
Yeah,
you imagine that one book that we get that all of us are like, this is a 10, I'm walking away now to cry.
And as a matter of fact, we have a new winner here.
Ah,
So-
ding, ding, ding.
So from our last podcast, we reviewed Prometheus, who by Ryan Little, who brought in a score of 7.64. And congratulations to you, Mr. Gillespie, coming with the 7.67. You have unseated the Comic Indie champion, and now you are the new king of the throne.
And this isn't final because Prometheus could actually come with an issue 2 and issue 3, and we can still average out his score.
Oh,
Ooh.
is this the Prometheus Souls showdown?
Okay. This is unfortunately the Comics Indie Throwdown.
That's it. It's evolved.
There you go.
Right on the spot. Right on the spot.
But if you guys, we did well, and this has been a great book, and I want to see what Prometheus does. I want to see what Severed Souls does, and let the games begin.
For more information on Severed Souls, you can check out Jay's page at www.severedsoulsbook.com, or you can check him out on Patreon. You can email him at info@severedsoulsbook.com. Find him on the Facebook, find him on Twitter. He is all social media out, so definitely he is good to go if you are looking for him.
And if you also want to be a part of the review, feel free to make a submission at submissions@comicindie.com, and we will be more than happy to look at your comic.
We're also love to hear from you guys. We love to hear from listeners. So please, if you have any comments, questions, if you want to know what's going on with us or anything else you'd love to hear us talk about on the podcast, any topics you would love to hear our opinions on, please. We are on Facebook at Comics Indie, I believe it is.
Comic Indie.
Comic Indie. Please send us a note there. You're welcome to put in messages, put a PM. Please keep it civil. I will recommend it that. But otherwise, please, we'd love to hear from you.
Excellent. For Comic Indie, I'm Ken Javier.
I'm Alex A.
And once again, I am Daniel.
And you've been listening to Comic Indie Podcast.